Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everyone.
So, since we last talked, it has been decided that Oprah Winfrey is inevitable. Donald Trump loves DACA, and Steve Bannon never knew the guy.
Normally, these would seem like big events or big news, but really in 2018, this is just, Tuesday.
Well, to that end, let me also point out that I think in the past week, or maybe shortly before then, Donald Trump said that we could drill oil off all of our coasts, except for Florida, because there's a Republican governor in Florida. But everywhere else you can drill. Like that,
believe me,
that on its own would have been a months-long controversy.
And isn't that a good argument? But isn't that a good argument for Trump's strategy? I mean, I don't even know if it's a strategy, but Trump does potentially expand the Overton window. And, again, you could argue that he distracts people while the Republicans in the Senate and the House can do stuff. He's keeping us all busy up here with the crazy things he says, and there's an argument that there's a method to the madness, or just unintentionally.
Yeah, I think it's probably more unintentional, but
there may be unforeseen benefits for Republicans.
Well, potentially, except, in the case of oil drilling, nothing's going to get drilled probably for 10 years. So there is no immediate political consequence probably either way. But, some things might just kind of show up. Where'd this come from? And maybe you'd be a little madder about it because you didn't get any anticipation around it. But on the whole, I think you're right there. I think this can be overstated. I think that Trump is probably not as effective. There's a line of argument that Trump's doing all these things that he's not getting credit for because you're not paying attention.
Right.
There was the Washington Post, the compilation after New Year's there's a whole slew of deregulatory actions that were done over the holidays that nobody even noticed.
Yeah. So that's a great example, right? So let's say that we had elected a normal sort of standard issue Republican who didn't tweet crazy things, didn't violate norms or upend the social fabric, but tried to do something on the regulatory front. The media could potentially go after that guy or gal and, try to make them out to be like this horrible monster. Anyway, they probably would. And with Trump, it doesn't hardly even get noticed, right? So
well, one of these deregulatory actions, there's a mine on national land in Minnesota that Obama had effectively shut down. The owner of the mine is Ivanka and Jared's landlord. The Interior Department allows the mine to start doing operations again. The Interior Department literally does not inform the media. There's no press release announcing the action. They do not tell Minnesota's Democratic governor, who opposed the project. They only tell a Republican mayor, and the mayor tells the press. That's insane.
It's so wild and sketchy, and yet I'm learning about the details from you right now.
Right.
Because he's flooded the zone with so much news, so much controversy, that you can't keep track of everything.
Well, I did hear on CNN this morning, they had North Carolina's Democratic governor on, who's been trying to say, look, the exemption for Florida's oil drilling superficially is, tourism is an important business for them, so they need to have an exemption, as if no other state has coastal tourism business on either side of the country. So, so North Carolina's governor was on to be like, hey, we want this exemption too. And I think it was Chris Cuomo who was trying to pressure him. Why do you think Trump is doing this? And Governor Cooper was definitely trying to not be mean towards Trump because he wants to get the exemption. But he's clearly trying to say, look, we have tourism business too. This is crazy. So there's a really kind of brazen transactional nature to Trump's politicking, which it wasn't that long ago we were complaining about the Cornhusker kickback, and that was the worst thing imaginable to do to try to get healthcare reform passed. I mean, this is
well, like, how big of a deal was Teapot Dome really? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so in the eye of the beholder. I mean, there are scandals that in one context could get the focus of attention for months or years and possibly bring somebody down that could also just be kind of cavalierly dismissed. The sexual harassment stuff is an example, right? About the context. So, things that a couple years ago wouldn't have mattered as much, all of a sudden in a different context, in a different time, could have much, again, we talked about Al Franken. If some of the stuff about Al Franken had come out a couple years earlier, he probably survives fine. But
right. Now, there's a transactional nature to Trump, which I agree with. Because he came out this week saying we should bring back earmarks.
Yeah.
And this has always been the conservative pet pride, well, the conservative success is that they banned earmarks. And just so people understand, earmarks gets kind of substituted for congressional pet project. But to be more precise, it's when a congressperson is able to get money for a project in his or her district without going through the appropriations process. And
you could put it into another bill.
Right. And so that often gets derided as pork. John McCain's always lashed out at these obscure little tiny projects that sound like they're a waste of money. Jeff Flake has always been an anti-earmark person. And so in the reign of Boehner and McConnell, they were actually banned. Now, the defense of earmarks, actually Rick Santorum is a defender of earmarks, and he has always said, look, you're taking the prerogative away from Congress and giving it to the executive. So that's not that's not in the spirit of the Constitution. So that's
in fact, the line item veto was deemed unconstitutional.
Right.
I think for similar reasons.
That's kind of the high-minded defense of earmarks. I would give the low-road defense of earmarks, which is they grease legislation. They help get legislation passed. When you have a hard time getting something over the finish line, throw a few bucks somebody's way, boom, you get that guy's vote. And Trump is saying, I like that. That's art of the deal. That speaks to Trump's ethos. So I don't know if he's actually going to succeed in getting Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell to relinquish the earmark ban. It's really not. I mean, McConnell might be more inclined to embrace earmarks than Ryan would.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't even know how much any of the leadership cares about earmarks. That was always, they were kind of pressured into that by the Freedom Caucus and the Ted Cruz Club for Growth wing.
And they're doing that not to save money, because it's not a lot of money. They're doing it because it makes it harder to pass legislation.
Well, look, I don't know what their motives are, but I would say that there are certainly legitimate reasons. I mean, earmarks look really bad, and I'm sure there have been plenty of boondoggles and bad things funded just to help reelect incumbents. And so I'm more sympathetic to the idea of getting rid of earmarks, but I think that there were unintended consequences that were probably predictable, but unintended, I would say unintended consequences of earmarks, which has led to more dysfunction, less bipartisanship, and more gridlock. So I think
but that's a feature, not a bug, to the average conservative who does not like to see active government pass a lot of bills.
Maybe that may be a hidden agenda for some. I would also argue, maybe. Look, I think that on the merits, you could look at earmarks and say that they're a bad idea because they betray the spirit of the bill. You're voting on the Civil Rights Act of 2019, but somehow, Senator so-and-so gets a bridge. Like, that has nothing to do with the bill. And we're taking taxpayer money and sort of essentially buying off people for votes. I mean, it is
we just did that.
Unseemly.
We just did that with tax reform. We just bought Lisa Murkowski's vote with oil drilling in Alaska.
They did. Of course they did. And I think you and I would argue, like, in the real world, politics is inherently a messy business and it's making sausage. But I do at least respect the people who are trying to reform the system, even if there were, I would argue, unintended consequences to doing that may end up, the cost may outweigh the gains.
So in the vein of deal-making, we had this spectacle this week where Trump had this hour-long televised bipartisan meeting where he sounds very open to not just a deal on DACA, but a broader comprehensive immigration deal, where he goes as far as saying, I'll take the heat. My whole life's been taking heat. So, I mean, because to some degree, you think, Trump says whatever on any given day.
Yeah.
You can't take anything he says seriously. And
that's almost like a clip from like a Sylvester Stallone movie. I'll take the heat. Right. My whole life's been taking the heat.
Right. And I'm sure Trump likes to see himself as being this is sort of like an episode in his ongoing reality TV show. And I by no means am saying I think immigration reform is somehow on a glide path now. But it does sort of suggest that there is a part of Trump that wants there to be a season finale where he does some kind of big deal that goes against your presumed narrative at the beginning of the season.
Yes, only Nixon can go to China. Only Trump can do immigration reform. And, he was at different times he's been for immigration reform. So it wouldn't surprise me. Very little in these days from Trump would surprise me. But then he waffles and he backtracks and he wants the wall too. And look, we've talked about this before. But my take is that, I get it. Look, if you're a Democrat, so I think we can go through like the bad faith and then the good faith for both of these sides. The bad faith argument, if you're a Democrat, if you believe that Democrats are operating in bad faith, you would believe, number one, what they really want are voters. They presume that more immigrants will eventually become more Democratic voters. And B, you might presume they really don't want any deal right now because even if you cut a great deal that saved the Dreamers, allowed a pathway to citizenship for other undocumented immigrants, if Trump gets a wall and if Trump becomes the president who gets credit for, why give him credit for anything? Republicans are on the path to losing the midterms. Don't cut any deal. That's sort of assuming that they're operating in bad faith. Of course, there's a bad faith version of Republicans, which says that they're all racist and they don't want any immigrants here because they view them, they want just white voters. But if you want to operate in good faith, compromise involves giving up something. And I've always been for immigration reform, but I'm also for enforcement. And so my take on like the wall is, like, I don't think it's got to be that effective. I don't think it's really needed. The symbolism of it bothers me a little. But big deal. Like, if that's what it takes to take care of Dreamers and to cut some, like, deal that will actually solve this problem, I think that's a compromise that should be made.
Yeah, I heard a Democratic operative, I think it was Patty Solis Doyle, who famously, I think she was forced out of the Clinton campaign in 2008, but she still has been in the business since then, if I'm remembering the story correctly. She was making that case. Look, the wall is essentially symbolic. I think it's ineffectual. I don't think it's a good idea, but if it's going to allow real people to stay in America, I'd be for that. I think that's a hard deal for Democrats to accept. I think the wall has taken on enormous symbolic significance, and you could argue you find a trade symbolism for tangible, but I think in the minds of many, the symbolism could very easily have tangible effect.
Right.
That it could be a huge disincentive. Even if it's not effective, like you can go under a wall or through a wall, through a smuggling operation. That it's sending a message to our neighbor that we don't like you and your kind is not wanted here, and that could have broader consequence. I mean, right now we're having a hell of a time renegotiating NAFTA because the Mexican people don't like Trump, and so there's no incentive to do a deal with Mexico because we're treating them like an adversary, not an ally. And having a wall on your border is basically like, I look at you as an adversary.
I mean, I get that, but if at the same time, as a trade-off, you're dealing, compassionately and humanely with immigrants who are already here, and you have a legal immigration system where you are still taking immigrants, and I would probably argue for more than maybe not more than we have now, because right now, actually, historically, pretty high in terms of legal immigrants that we let in. I believe that's true, but I would probably want more than say like the Breitbart people might want. But in any event, to me, like that's what compromises are. I mean, should that be a deal breaker? And I guess my concern would be that, look, it might be a waste of money, but but it's not that big of a waste of money. Okay, we waste money on other stuff. Like, I don't think that's a deal breaker. Is it pointless? Maybe, probably. But we do a lot of pointless stuff. Could it pacify and please a pretty sizable chunk of the public who, for whatever reason, feel like this is something important to them? Yes, it would do that. And you were just arguing in favor of earmarks, right? To grease the skids of legislation. Like, if we're about bipartisan deals and compromise, just as earmarks are sometimes, like these throwing away some money in order to like accomplish something, I kind of view this the same way.
Well, I think a docket deal probably has to be greased in some way, and I think Democrats have to be careful in arguing against the wall. They're not arguing against border security in general. And in the Obama presidency, the 2013 Senate deal had an enormous amount of border security in it. I mean, they took, I think it was $40 billion. They had an early CBO score. It said this is going to be a deficit reducer. Let's take that money and just throw it at border security. Like, tons of agents. Let's have technology. Let's do whatever we can. Let's show that we're not saying open borders and allowing those who are already here to stay and creating a pathway to citizenship and improving the general flow. We can still patrol the border and have a better sense of who is coming and who is going. So I see sometimes people talking about border security being what Republicans want, Democrats want people to stay. If that's the frame, that's not a good frame for Democrats, because there are a lot of people that want border security in general. You can be border security and not want a wall. So I think Democrats need to be careful not to fall into that trap. And I think you have to be able to propose good faith border security ideas. And there's a little bit of a hinting from Trump's side that maybe it's not a literal wall, maybe it's fencing, or maybe it's invisible fence, or whatever that kind of stuff is. The more you can steer things into that direction, the easier it's going to be for Democrats to do that deal, because they did that deal. I mean, they already did that deal in 2013.
Right. Bill, your audio and video are not syncing. I just want to make sure that on the recorded version, mine are.
You look fine, and you look fine to me.
As
I look fine to me, and you look fine to me.
That's all that matters. Yeah, look, so, I don't know, maybe you're making me a little more optimistic than I was.
Well, I don't want to go that far, because it's an incredibly fraught issue. Trump is incredibly mercurial.
Totally,
the Freedom Caucus could spike almost anything here. So there's still a lot of moving.
It seems
pieces.
like the Freedom Caucus doesn't really want to do anything, and if it looks like there's a deal that could get done, and that where there's some compromise, they're going to assume that we're about to get rolled, and they'll freak out and get cold feet and kill it. And I just don't see why. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong about Democrats, but I just think the smart play for them, if you're just thinking about pure politics, is to not give Trump a win and to tell, Hispanics, you need to show up and vote in November so we can get the deal.
Well, it's a little complicated. They can't give Trump the wall. They can't give Trump a real wall. That would just kill their own base. They also can't walk away from a fair deal that allows people to stay. If it's their fault that real people get deported, that's bad for them. So they can't just play politics here. I do think that for a deal to get done, that does not include a wall, Trump would have to really lean in and sell his own base on it. I mean, that's the ultimate test of, can Trump bring his base someplace they don't naturally want to go. He'd have to really prove that. And I don't know if he says he wants the heat. He'd have to really follow through if that was to be the case. And I've yet to see him actually focus on any one issue for a long enough period of time. I mean, everything we've seen in the past year is that you can't trust this guy to keep his word. He hangs people out to dry all the time. So it's an incredible leap of faith to do that kind of deal with him. And so I'm very skeptical about that actually occurring. But the other complication here is that you have this judge's ruling that for the time being leaves DACA in place, at least for those currently in the program. It doesn't allow for new applicants, but those currently in can be renewed. Now, I've seen, I think the National Review had a piece arguing this was a total hack job judicial opinion that will likely be overturned, and maybe that's true, but I can't say, and you can't say, how long is this going to be in limbo? And the longer a temporary suspension of Trump's order is in effect, that lessens pressure on Congress to do a deal. The pressure is people are going to get shipped out by March, so you better do this so that's not on your shoulders. Well, if that's not the case anymore, that pressure's not there. And
that judge's order could potentially make it less likely Republicans act on this.
Well, exactly. I mean, the fear, I think, for Trump, Ryan, and McConnell is we don't do a deal, 800,000 people get deported. They're in every state in the country. They have jobs. They have friends. People who might otherwise, rant about immigrants might say, "Well, not my friend. Why you? That guy's a good guy. Why are you shipping that guy out?" I mean, the political implication, I think, is very uncertain because you don't know exactly where these people are, what districts they're in, what states they're in, what kind of stories that's going to generate. It's a huge ticking political time bomb. I think they don't want to have to hold that time bomb when it explodes. But if it's not going to explode in March, you don't have to stick your neck out.
Indeed. Well, I guess we've avoided it long enough. I think we probably have to talk about the big story of the week, which is Oprah.
So, as you recall,
you were way ahead of the curve as usual.
So I had a piece in March, The Serious Case for Oprah 2020, which I want to say up front was not an Oprah or bust piece. It was not saying Oprah is the only savior the Democrats have and that everyone should bow down and kiss her ring. And I even argued in the piece that 2020 might actually not be her ideal year to run as a contrast to Trump, because if Democrats are saying let's not do another celebrity CEO, that wouldn't be the best time for Oprah to run. I do think it is too unrealistic and simplistic to say it's ridiculous to talk about her. She has no experience. She has no qualification. She's just a TV personality. Let's not live in a world where only TV personalities can run for president. I think all the evidence shows is that a lot of voters look at celebrity and wealth as evidence of accomplishment and credibility. And it's not just Trump. We had Governor Schwarzenegger. We had Governor Jesse the Body Ventura. We have in Italy the 5-Star Movement, which is run by a comedian, which is upended to politics there. The president of Guatemala, Jimmy Morales, was a comic actor. There's a general human nature to embrace celebrity. Now, it's not every celebrity. Roseanne Barr didn't get very far in 2012, so you can't just show.
But if she'd run in 1980, I mean, if she had run, not for president, let's say, but if she had run for something in 1988, who knows?
If she ran in 1988 and hadn't hawked a loogie and grabbed her crotch after singing the national anthem at a baseball park, maybe she'd have a shot.
I think that happened after 1988.
It's a certain kind of celebrity and how you use your celebrity that's going to make it work. You know, Oprah is actually very akin to Trump in that she is kind of a self-help guru. There are different kinds of self-help gurus. You know, Trump was a get-rich-quick self-help guru, but there was sort of a sense of, I know the secrets to success. I have some rarefied knowledge that my wealth is evidence of, and if you put me in the White House, I will use it on your behalf. And Oprah has spent decades saying, I know how to help you live your best life.
Yep.
And
like Joel Osteen.
What, right, Joel? It's prosperity gospel, and Oprah is someone who can say, "Look, I don't have inherited wealth. I am literally the only African American woman billionaire in the world."
And it's a rags to riches story.
Absolutely. So she has better business credentials than Donald Trump. She has better celebrity credentials than Donald Trump. Her ratings have been better. She has more awards, and she's just a more uplifting, positive personality than Donald Trump. So there's an argument that she matches up favorably to him, and that she would be taken seriously as a candidate so long as she can give opinions about Yemen and global trade and financial deregulation. She would have to prove herself on that score. She'd have to vet properly.
But she could. I agree. She has to get up to speed on knowledge of public policy.
Of course. I mean,
but I would argue that she may be the only person who could win a Democratic primary without having to go too far to the left on actual substantive policy issues.
Oh, and I think it's why a good number of Bernie-crats are actively antagonistic towards the idea we don't need another billionaire. How could I saw Ryan Cooper, who writes at The Week, he mused that she probably supported...
Bill, I'm a contributing editor at The Week. You don't have to tell me about this.
He said on Twitter, I bet she supported the Republican tax bill, which is not really based on anything at all. But I think that is sort of an attitude on the Bernie left that she's one of them. She's not a populist. She's not a Democratic socialist. Why should we just fall over for her? And who knows? I mean, she hasn't spoken about these issues in great detail. But I think you're right. I don't think she would have to go that far to the left because there's enough Democrats who would potentially support her. I do think she would have to show more public policy knowledge than Donald Trump. I think the bar for sophistication in the Democratic primary is higher than the Republican primary.
So, I mean, you know, there's a lot to talk about here. But one thing I think is if you're Oprah and you're going to run, I think the way to do it is to get in late. To get in late. You flirt with the idea of running. You bone up on the issues. And she's very smart, obviously, and I'm told a meticulous learner. She'll study. She's not like Trump. She would bone up on the issues. Unlike Palin, unlike Trump. But you don't actually get in until the last minute, I think, because what you want is a short campaign where you where you basically show up and there's a shock and awe effect, but you don't have as many opportunities to have to be on the record about the hot button issues.
I think you could overplay that strategy. So let's game this out for a bit. People are going to be announcing the day after the midterms in November 2018. So
my theory is just to know the premise of my arguing that my point would be you're thinking about winning the general election, you know, and the way, like, I'll just say it right now, I might vote for Oprah. Okay, I might vote for Oprah if I believe that she's going to basically be like, look, I'm going to pick a seasoned politician to be my vice president. I'm going to pick a cabinet that's half Republican and half Democrat. I'm not going to focus on like abortion on demand or raising taxes. I'm going to focus on bringing people together, doing things like infrastructure, restoring hope and optimism in America. Like, that's the scenario whereby I might even vote for Oprah. So my premise here is that she needs to win the primary, but she can't become a Democrat, a liberal left-wing Democratic politician in the process of winning the primary, because that ruins the potential for her not just to win the presidency, but to actually govern. Because the danger of Oprah, and the people that I've talked to who are smart, knowledgeable people who actually like Oprah, their concern is that here's the unspoken thing. Here's the unspoken thing. The African American community, look at what happened to Dr. Ben Carson. Now, Oprah's not Ben Carson, but look at what happened to him. They lost an icon.
Right. He was just the great doctor, and now he's a right-wing politician. Look
at Bill Cosby as a different version. Okay. I'm not saying politics are what did him in, although it didn't help. But that's a guy who was a unifying figure, a positive figure that the community has lost. For reasons of
I think politics are a big problem. The Hannibal Buress comment, which sparked the reopening into his past, was premised on Bill Cosby's a political hypocrite, lecturing us about morality when he's been doing all these things. So I think the politics is very much a part of that story. So
if you get where I'm going with this, if you believe that African American kids need this figure that has like a 90% approval rating, and everybody loves her, I might even vote for her, then why on earth already I don't know if you saw this, Bill, I'm guessing you did. She starts, the trial balloon is floated or whatever after the Golden Globes, and you start seeing pictures of Oprah with Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
That is a taste of a small taste. Well,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, your premise is she should go in late so she can avoid going through the grinder. I don't think that is avoidable. She will go through the grinder. I don't think she can. I mean, and you're also making a presumption that she wants to govern as sort of a non-ideological centrist, and we don't know that she wants to be that person. But if she did,
it's plausible.
It's plausible. I don't think she can skirt abortion in the Democratic primary. There's some touchstone issues that you will get asked about right away.
Could you say what Bill Clinton and Mario Cuomo, I think, and every Democrat from 1980, every national Democrat from 1980 to 1998 said, which is, could you basically say, I'm personally pro-choice, but but I'm not pro-abortion. In other words, could you sort of be like, or could you say, like, personally, I have trouble with abortion. It's an issue that troubles me, but I'm not trying to change the law. I don't even want this. This is not going to be the focus of my administration. It's the law is what it is.
Well, the question is, who are your judges going to be? Are your judges going to support Roe v. Wade? I mean, that's the ultimate question, and you have to have an answer for that question.
I believe that I could write an answer that might thread the needle. Right? I mean, it's possible. Bill Clinton could do that. Like Hillary Clinton couldn't. She didn't. But Bill Clinton could have potentially written an answer to that question.
Well, Bill Clinton's answer was safe, legal, and rare. That's how we threaded the needle.
Okay. But she said, could she get away with that today?
I think it has to be a different formulation. But I think you could do something along the lines of, we want to have robust sex education and widely accessible birth control, so we have fewer unwanted pregnancies. and I'd be happy to work with people in the pro-life community to that agenda. That's the Kirk Cameron "listen to me" formulation for the great 1980s debate movie. But let me move away from abortion for a bit, because I think there's a broader strategic question. If Oprah runs, when does she get in? Should she freeze the field and come in late? Because I think the race starts, if it hasn't started already, in many ways it has, but it's going to really start in earnest after the midterms. People are going to announce right away. It's going to be a lot of people want to run. There's this huge eagerness to kind of get on with it. We don't want to think about Donald Trump presidency for longer than we have to. Let's start thinking about who the replacement is. So people are going to jump in. If there is a sense that there's a big name out there teasing and hasn't jumped in yet, that freezes a lot of debate. That freezes donor money, that freezes volunteers, that freezes staff. So Oprah could do that. Bernie could do that. Biden could do that. If they're looming but haven't quite jumped in, it makes people kind of wait and see. So she has the power to do that. But if you go in too late, you have the Wesley Clark problem. Wesley Clark came in, and Dean was kicking up a lot of dust in the spring and summer of 2003. Wesley Clark gets in the fall of 2003. He immediately shoots to the top. He had Michael Moore's endorsement. This was the liberal general that the left was waiting for. This is going to be the real savior. And then immediately he botches the Iraq war question about whether he was for it or against it, and he never recovers.
Yeah. Now, do you think if Wes Moore gets in,
Wesley Clark?
I'm sorry, Wes Clark. Thanks for that. If Wesley Clark gets in early, it's sort of like a restaurant with a soft opening.
Yeah,
about this, right?
Obama had some not so great moments early on. And there was a healthcare forum in early 2007 where people thought this guy is not ready for prime time, but it was so early, only the real close insiders paid attention. Clark got in with so much hype and a crush of media. If you're going to do that, you better be perfect.
Yeah. And
Oprah has a lot of boning up to do to make sure she would be perfect if she was going to play that kind of game.
I mean, I would even argue a similar phenomenon happened to Sarah Palin. I mean, she was airdropped into the middle of a presidential race.
Right. And Dan Quayle similarly, had a rough opening.
Yeah. But the difference is, if you're a vice president, you don't control that. If you're the principal, you could prevent that by planning accordingly, and that's what you're saying Oprah should do, potentially.
But I agree with you. It makes sense for her to be out in the open field for a 2-year period. You want to have some sort of sense of anticipation, since she's being called to do this, not that she's overly eager to do it. But right. I think you can overplay that game and get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, you can be too cute by half, right? I mean, it's the principle, I think, is true, but don't try to be like too cute with it. So do you think, so how real, how real do you think this is? I think we would agree that in the era of Donald Trump, you can't dismiss something like this. But do you think this is a 50-50 proposition or what?
My gut feeling is that Oprah has a movie coming out in the spring, and this is to sell tickets. I don't believe she wants to descend from her perch, living her best life to deal with, to have her reputation become polarizing and not be a unifying figure. I don't think she really wants to do that. I was piqued by the Politico article that followed the Oprah boomlet with all the other billionaires who are thinking of running.
Right.
Tom Steyer, Howard Schultz, Mike Bloomberg. Those seem to be the ones that were the more serious possibilities. They mentioned Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, but they don't seem to be as serious about it.
I think you're right.
Mark Cuban as well. But a number of those people, with the exception of Steyer, probably Bloomberg, Schultz, or Cuban don't run as Democrats. Cuban's talking about running as a Republican, and Bloomberg and Schultz will probably run as independents, and Cuban can run as independent. Yeah. So I do think I think none of those people are Oprah and Trump. They don't have long histories. They don't have bonds with the public that last for several decades. They would seem kind of airdropped in, but it does have to make you think. What kind of general election are we going to see? Is it going to be this kind of left-right debate, or is it going to be a more complicated left-right-center debate where maybe even if Trump is at 35% approval, he could still win because the vote gets split?
So I think if I'm friends with Oprah, I say don't do this because you're already Oprah, baby. Like, it doesn't get better.
Right.
Like, you can change things if you want to change the world. You've got a great life. You were beloved by, like, pretty much universally. And politics is a messy, dirty business. Nobody gets out of it unscathed.
There's no evidence she has ever won it. Trump's been teasing a presidential run since 1987. It's been on his mind for a long time. We made fun of it for a long time and thought he was always just teasing to sell books or whatever. But the fact is, he was always thinking about it. Yeah. Oprah has not always been thinking about it. There's no evidence that this has been on the weighing on the back of her mind. So why would you pivot all of a sudden?
I think the only reason for her to do it, and this will make me sound, naive, but the only reason to do it is if you sincerely believe that we're in real trouble because of Donald Trump, and it may be that Oprah, the kind of person that I want, who does govern in a completely new paradigm and a bipartisan, post-partisan manner, it may be that she's the only person that could get away with it, that you could almost guarantee she would win, that she could avoid having to play the game. Everything says don't do it unless you really believe in things and you really believe that it's possible to change things, and that she very well could be, I hate to talk about like the great man or great woman theory of politics, but she's pretty uniquely positioned to not only beat Trump, but actually have a chance to govern in a uniting way.
I would not be surprised if there are people around her who are telling her that you are the only one. I mean, Oprah came in to the Obama campaign and said, this is the one. And people might be saying that to Oprah right now. The only evidence is she's not the one. She might be a one. But, a Rasmussen poll, not my favorite pollster, but it's the one poll we have so far, had Oprah beating Trump by 10 points, 48-38. And 48 is not 60. It's not you've unified the country, but it's still beating Trump handily. There was a poll in November that had Biden beating Trump by 11. So Oprah is still roughly at the same place that Biden is right now. And that same poll, so that was the Politico Morning Consult poll in November, that had Bernie beating Trump by 6. So I'm not trying to make the point here that Bernie isn't necessarily the most popular politician in America, which is often stated by Bernie fans. There's other polling evidence that they can cite, but there's some mixed polling towards how popular Bernie is, but he would beat Trump too. This is sort of the point. Lots of people could beat Trump as it stands today. There's no singular person who is uniquely situated to beat Trump. So if everyone was losing to Trump and Oprah was the only person coming out ahead, you might say, let's throw the long ball here. But, and I understand people saying, well, I can't trust these polls. Trump was unpopular the entire way through and still won. He won with fewer votes, so I can't trust these national polls. That's a fair point. And there's an argument that Obama could pick that lock because she has bonds with the white working class women of this country that others don't. But there's an argument that Biden has a white working class appeal. There's an argument that Bernie has white working class appeal. There's no one case to make here. So I don't think you could put the pressure and say it has to be you.
All right. I hate to do it, Bill, but it does have to be me. I have to go pick up my kid from school. Apparently, I just got a text from the wife.
Oh, okay. No Bannon. We can't pile on Bannon today.
We can't talk Bannon. But look, I think this has been a hell of an episode, and you've gotten your money. The viewers have gotten their money's worth. So I think, look, I'm if you want to try to reconvene, but I would say let's just
let's leave on top.
Yeah, go out on top, right? You can't improve upon this.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week here at the DMZ. What should folks? What do you got to plug this week?
Oh, let's see. The podcast is doing good. I just had Andy Crouch on, who wrote a book called The Tech Wise Family. So if you have kids and worried about screen time, this is for you. How to manage that. He's got these 10 commitments sort of rules for handling technology with kids. I talked to Jeremy Peters, who broke the Bannon story, the New York Times reporter who broke the story about Bannon leaving Breitbart.com. And I talked to Bruce Mehlman, who is a GOP-leaning strategist and public affairs guru, who has this great regular slide presentation he puts out. The latest one is about why 2018 is going to make 2017 look like peanuts in terms of the chaos and craziness we're dealing with. How about you, Bill?
Not as much as that to plug. Do check out my Politico piece from last week. Steve Bannon was never that smart. Otherwise, and I had a little extra Oprah insight. They had a Should Oprah Run pundit roundup in Politico that I was in. Otherwise, go listen to Matt on the podcast machine as much as possible.
And follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Bill Scher, always a pleasure, my friend.
Take care.
See ya.